Have you ever planted onions expecting massive, juicy bulbs only to pull up something the size of a golf ball? Or perhaps you ended up with all green leaves and absolutely no bulb underneath. Welcome to the frustrating yet incredibly rewarding world of onion cultivation. Today we are going to uncover the ultimate secrets to growing big and delicious onions. I am going to show you how to avoid the most serious errors that ruin harvests every single year. But here is the real hook. Sometimes the harder you try to care for your onions, the worse they perform. Yes, loving your plants too much might actually be destroying your crop. We are going to reveal the counterintuitive truth about growing onions from both sets and seedlings. Are you ready to find out if you have been sabotaging your own garden? Let me know in the comments if you prefer planting seeds or using small onion sets. Before we dig into the soil, let us establish some important background. Onions have been cultivated by humans for over 5,000 years. They were worshipped by ancient cultures and fed to workers building massive pyramids. Today, they are a staple in almost every kitchen around the globe. But to grow them successfully, you must understand the two main starting methods. First, we have onion sets. These are tiny dormant onion bulbs grown the previous year. They are easy to plant and mature quickly. Second, we have onion seedlings. These are started from seeds indoors, usually in late winter. Seedlings require more work up front, but often result in much larger, better storing onions. Understanding the fundamental needs of this ancient plant is the key to unlocking a massive harvest in your modern back garden. Let us dive right into the first major factor, which is choosing the correct onion variety for your specific location. Many people think that an onion is just an onion, and any seed packet will do. This is a very common myth. The truth is that onions are highly sensitive to the length of daylight. They use the hours of sunlight to know exactly when to stop growing leaves and start forming a bulb. If you plant a long day variety in a southern region with shorter summer days, the plant will never get the signal to form a bulb. You will end up with giant green tops and a tiny root. Imagine spending months watering and weeding only to harvest something that looks like thick grass. A perfect illustration of this is the gardener who buys exotic seeds online without checking their daylight requirements. Always match the variety to your latitude. Short day onions need about 10 to 12 hours of light to trigger bulb formation. Long day onions need 14 to 16 hours. Choosing the wrong one is a guaranteed path to failure. Therefore, always read the label on the seed packet or the bag of onion sets. Do not just look at the pretty picture on the front. Do your research before you even touch the soil. Now that you have the right variety, let us talk about soil preparation and the hidden danger of acidity. Onions have a very shallow root system. Because their roots do not go deep, they rely entirely on the top few inches of soil for all their nutrients. There is a persistent myth that onions grow well in acidic, forest-like soils because they are tough root vegetables. This is completely false. Onions despise acidic soil. If your soil pH is below 6, your onions will struggle to absorb vital nutrients no matter how much fertilizer you add. You will see yellowing leaves and stunted growth. Imagine trying to drink a thick milkshake through a very tiny straw. That is what an onion experiences in acidic soil. A great way to fix this is by adding agricultural lime or wood ash well before planting. If you notice your onions turning pale yellow despite regular watering, test your soil pH immediately. Taking the time to create a loose, well-draining bed with a neutral pH is the absolute foundation of success. Do not skip this crucial step or your harvest will suffer. Moving on to planting, we must address a very serious mistake regarding planting depth, especially when using onion sets. When gardeners see a small bulb, they often treat it like a potato or a tulip bulb. They dig a deep hole and bury the onion set under several inches of soil. The myth here is that planting deep protects the bulb and makes it grow larger. In reality, planting onions too deep restricts their ability to expand. As the onion grows, it needs to push outwards. If it is buried under heavy soil, it cannot swell properly. You will end up with oddly shaped, elongated onions that look more like leeks. The correct way to plant an onion set is to just barely cover it. The pointy tip should actually be visible, peeking right out of the soil line. Picture a duck floating on water with only its bottom half submerged. That is how your onion sets should look when planted. By planting shallowly, You give the bulb the freedom to expand naturally above the soil surface as it grows larger. Let us consider the spacing of your plants, which is another area where enthusiasm leads to disaster. Gardeners often want to maximize their harvest in a small space. They plant their seedlings or sets just 1 or 2 inches apart. The myth is that crowding them will give you a larger total yield by volume. However, onions are fiercely competitive. Because of those shallow root systems we talked about, they will fight to the death for water and nutrients. If they are crowded, none of them will win. You will harvest a massive quantity of tiny, unusable onions. Think of a crowded underground train where nobody has room to breathe or expand their arms. That is your onion bed if you plant too closely. To get those huge, prize-winning bulbs, you must give them personal space. Plant your sets or seedlings at least 4 to 6 inches apart in rows that are 12 inches apart. This generous spacing allows the roots to spread and gather the fuel they need to build a massive bulb. Let us break down a popular debate, the truth about growing from sets versus growing from seeds. Many beginners believe the myth that onion sets are universally superior because they are easier and faster. While sets are certainly convenient, they come with a hidden risk. Onion sets are essentially stressed plants. They were grown, pulled out of the ground, dried out, and stored in bags. Because of this stressful life cycle, they are much more likely to bolt or produce a flower stalk before they form a big bulb. Growing onions from seed and transplanting them as seedlings completely bypasses this stress. A great example is comparing two neighboring garden beds. The bed with sets might give you a quick harvest of medium onions, but the bed with carefully raised seedlings will often yield massive uniform bulbs that store much longer in the winter. While sets are great for a quick crop of spring onions, serious growers aiming for huge bulbs often transition entirely to planting seedlings. Watering is our next crucial topic, specifically the mistakes made early in the season. Because onions have those shallow roots, they are incredibly sensitive to dry soil. A common myth among casual gardeners is that onions are tough, drought-resistant plants that only need water when the soil is completely bone dry. This is a terrible approach. In the early stages of growth, the onion is focused on growing its green leaves. Each green leaf directly correlates to a layer of the onion bulb later on. If the plant gets thirsty, it stops growing leaves. Imagine building a house but suddenly running out of bricks. The building process stops. A good illustration is checking the soil with your finger. If the top inch is dry, it is time to water. Do not wait for the soil to crack and pull away from the edges of the bed. Consistent, even moisture during the first 2 months of growth is absolutely non-negotiable if you want a plant capable of supporting a large bulb. As the season progresses, we enter the critical bulbing phase, and this is where watering rules change slightly. Once you see the base of the plant begin to swell, the onion requires a steady supply of water to expand those layers. However, sudden fluctuations in watering can be disastrous. There is a myth that flooding the plants heavily once a week is enough. But if the onion goes through a dry spell, the outer skin begins to harden. If you then flood the garden with water, the inside of the onion swells rapidly and bursts right through the hardened outer skin. You will find split, ruined onions that will rot immediately. Think of blowing up a balloon that has a piece of tape stuck to it. The tension causes it to pop. To avoid splitting, you must maintain a very even moisture level during the bulbing phase. Drip irrigation is highly recommended here. It delivers a slow, steady drink directly to the roots without creating severe wet and dry cycles. Now we must discuss the absolute hardest part for many gardeners, which is knowing when to stop watering completely. As harvest time approaches, your instincts will tell you to keep watering to make the onions just a little bit bigger. The myth is that watering right up to harvest day maximizes the yield. This is perhaps the most destructive mistake you can make. If an onion is full of water, when you pull it out of the ground, it will not cure properly. It will rot in your pantry within a few weeks. Imagine putting a wet sponge in a plastic bag. It gets moldy very fast. About 2 to 3 weeks before you plan to harvest, you must cut off the water supply entirely. The soil should become quite dry. This signals to the plant that the season is ending. It forces the onion to stop growing and start forming its protective papery skins. Starving them of water at the end is the ultimate secret to long-term winter storage. Let us talk about feeding your crop, starting with the misuse of nitrogen fertilizer. Nitrogen is the nutrient that makes plants grow green and leafy. Because gardeners want big plants, they often dump heavy nitrogen fertilizers on their onions all season long. The myth is that bigger green tops automatically equal a bigger bulb below ground. While you do need strong leaves early on, applying nitrogen too late in the season is a massive error. If you give onions nitrogen when they should be forming bulbs, they will ignore the bulb and keep making leaves. You will end up with a plant that has a stalk as thick as a baseball bat, but practically no onion at the bottom. A classic example is using fresh manure right before harvest time. It is a disaster. You must stop all nitrogen feeding as soon as the onions begin to swell at the base. From that point on, the plant should use the energy stored in the existing leaves to build the bulb, not create new foliage. Since we stop the nitrogen, what should we be feeding them? This brings us to the importance of phosphorus and potassium. These are the unsung heroes of root and bulb development. A dangerous myth is that basic all-purpose lawn fertilizer is fine for the vegetable garden. Lawn fertilizer is almost entirely nitrogen. For onions, you need potassium to build strong cell walls and phosphorus to develop the root system and the bulb itself. If your soil lacks these, your onions will remain small and soft. An excellent natural source of potassium is wood ash from your fireplace, applied lightly in the spring. Bone meal is fantastic for phosphorus. Think of potassium as the armor that protects the onion during storage, and phosphorus as the fuel pump that pushes energy down into the bulb. If you want sweet, dense onions that last all winter, shift your feeding strategy away from nitrogen and towards these essential bulb-building nutrients in the middle of the season. Weeding is our next major battleground. Onions are terrible fighters when it comes to weeds. Their leaves are thin and upright, meaning they cast almost no shade. This allows sunlight to hit the soil directly, causing weed seeds to explode into growth. A surprising myth among permaculture beginners is that weeds can act as a living mulch to keep the soil cool. For onions, this is totally false. Weeds will outcompete onions for water and nutrients every single time. If you leave weeds in your onion bed, you will harvest miniature onions. Imagine a tiny kitten trying to eat from the same bowl as three huge dogs. The kitten gets nothing. You must keep your onion beds meticulously clean. Because onion roots are so shallow, you cannot use a heavy hoe or deep rotavator, or you will slice the onion roots to pieces. Hand pulling or using a very shallow stirrup hoe is the only safe way to keep the bed clear without destroying your crop. Let us shift our focus to pests, specifically the dreaded onion fly. You might walk out to your garden one morning and notice your onion leaves turning yellow and falling over long before harvest time. When you pull the plant up, you find the bulb is a rotting mess filled with tiny white maggots. The myth is that onions are so strong-smelling that they naturally repel all insects. The onion fly is actually attracted to the scent of damaged onions. The adult fly lays eggs at the base of the plant, and the maggots eat their way inside. A prime example of causing this problem is aggressively weeding and accidentally bruising the onion leaves, which releases that strong onion smell into the wind. To prevent this, never thin or weed your onions on a wet, windy day when the smell travels far. You can also use fine mesh row covers early in the season to physically block the adult flies from ever reaching your plants to lay their eggs. Fungal diseases are another silent killer of the onion crop. Because onions need regular water early on, the environment can become quite humid. The most common enemy here is downy mildew, which shows up as fuzzy grayish-purple spots on the green leaves. A dangerous myth is that as long as the bulb is underground, leaf diseases do not matter. But remember, the leaves are the solar panels powering the bulb's growth. If fungi destroy the leaves, the bulb stops growing instantly. Think of a solar-powered car driving into a dark tunnel. It simply stops. The best defense against fungal diseases is excellent air circulation. This goes back to our earlier point about proper spacing. If the wind can blow freely between your plants, the leaves will dry out quickly after a rain, making it very hard for fungal spores to take hold. Avoid watering from overhead late in the evening. Always water at the base of the plants in the early morning. Now we must tackle the heartbreak of bolting. Bolting is when the onion plant suddenly sends up a thick, hard stalk with a flower bud at the top. Many novice gardeners think the myth is true, that a flowering onion is a happy, exceptionally healthy plant. In reality, a flower is a sign of panic. When an onion feels threatened by its environment, it thinks it is going to die. So it abandons bulb production and rushes to make seeds to ensure the next generation survives. Once an onion bolts, the bulb stops growing entirely, and the core of the onion becomes a hard, woody stick that is impossible to eat. Imagine biting into a crisp apple and hitting a solid piece of wood. That is a bolted onion. If you see a flower stalk forming, your only option is to snap it off immediately and harvest that onion for immediate use in the kitchen. It will never grow bigger, and it will never store properly for the winter. What exactly causes this panic and leads to bolting? For onion sets, the biggest culprit is temperature shock. This relates to how the sets were stored before you bought them or how you stored them before planting. The myth is that keeping onion sets in a cold shed or fridge keeps them fresh until planting day. This is a fatal error. If onion sets are exposed to fluctuating cold temperatures, they become convinced they have just survived a long, hard winter. When you plant them in the warm spring soil, their biological clock tells them it is their second year of life. And in the second year, onions naturally produce flowers. A classic example is buying sets early and leaving them in a cold garage for a month. To prevent this, store your purchased sets in a warm, dry place inside your house until the very day you plant them. Protecting them from cold shocks is the best way to keep their energy focused on growing a bulb instead of a flower. If you are growing from seedlings started indoors, you face a different challenge called hardening off. You have spent 8 weeks nursing delicate little green sprouts under warm grow lights. A terrible myth is that once the weather is nice, you can take these seedlings straight from your living room and plant them directly into the harsh outdoor garden. If you do this, the shock of the intense sun, cold wind, and fluctuating night temperature will either kill them outright or stunt their growth permanently. Think of someone who has been inside all winter, suddenly spending 10 hours on a sunny beach without sun cream. They will burn. You must introduce your seedlings to the outdoors gradually. Start by placing them outside in the shade for just 2 hours a day. Over the course of a week, slowly increase their time outside and their exposure to direct sunlight. This process thickens their cell walls and prepares them for the real world. While we are talking about seedlings, let us discuss a very controversial technique, which is trimming. When you grow onion seedlings, they often become very tall, thin, and floppy, tangling together in their trays. Many people believe the myth that cutting the leaves of a young plant will severely harm or kill it. Actually, giving your onion seedlings a haircut is highly beneficial. When the green tops reach about 5 inches tall, you can safely trim them back to 3 inches using clean scissors. This forces the plant to stop growing weak, leggy tops and focus energy on developing a thicker, stronger root system. It also makes them much easier to separate and plant. Imagine trying to plant a handful of cooked spaghetti. That is what planting untrimmed seedlings is like. You can even trim the long, stringy roots slightly right before planting to stimulate fresh root growth in the garden bed. Do not be afraid to give them a little trim. Let us look at a strange phenomenon that happens primarily in heavy clay soils, which is the push-out effect. As your onions grow and the bulbs expand, you might notice them seemingly pushing themselves entirely out of the soil, sitting completely on top of the soil surface. A very common myth is that an exposed onion is in danger and must be pushed back down into the soil or covered with extra soil. Do not do this. As we learned earlier, onions need to expand above the soil. In heavy soils, the ground is too hard for the bulb to push downwards, so the roots push the entire bulb upwards. This is totally normal and actually beneficial. When the bulb sits on top of the soil, it dries out better and is less susceptible to soil-borne rot. Think of it as the onion taking a sunbath to build a tougher skin. Leave them alone. As long as the stringy roots are securely anchored in the ground, an exposed bulb is a happy, healthy bulb. Knowing exactly when to harvest is our next critical lesson. Many gardeners get impatient and pull their onions too early, or they wait too long and risk rot. The myth is that you should forcibly stomp down or bend the green tops over yourself to force the onion to finish growing. Stomping the tops damages the neck of the onion, creating an open wound where bacteria can enter and rot the bulb from the inside out. You must let the plant tell you when it is ready. When the onion is mature, The neck will naturally soften and the green tops will fall over on their own. When about half to three-quarters of your onion tops have fallen over naturally, that is your signal. Stop watering completely, wait a few days for the soil to dry, and then gently pull them up. Imagine a runner crossing the finish line and collapsing from exhaustion. Let the plant finish its race naturally. Do not break the necks manually just to rush the harvest. Finally, we arrive at the most important step for winter storage, which is the curing process. You have pulled your beautiful, massive onions from the ground. A disastrous myth is that leaving them lying out in the hot, baking summer sun for a week is the best way to cure them. The hot sun will literally cook the raw onions, causing them to blister, turn mushy, and rot instantly. Curing is about drying, not cooking. To cure onions properly, you need a warm, dry, and well-ventilated space that is completely out of direct sunlight. A covered porch, a dry shed with open doors, or laying them on wire racks in a shaded garage are perfect examples. Leave the green tops attached while they cure. The bulb will continue to draw the last bit of energy from the drying leaves. After 2 to 3 weeks, the necks will be completely tight and dry, and the papery skins will rustle like dry leaves. Only then should you trim the tops and store your perfect harvest for the winter. And there you have it, the absolute truth about growing massive, delicious onions. The biggest turnaround here is realizing that sometimes doing less is actually doing more. By not burying them too deep, not overwatering them at the end, and not feeding them nitrogen too late, you are allowing the plant to do what it naturally wants to do. We have covered everything from selecting the right day-length varieties to the careful process of curing them in the shade. Gardening is a journey of learning from our mistakes. Thank you so much for watching and spending your time with us today. If these secrets have changed the way you look at the humble onions in your garden, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We are digging deep into the gardening wisdom that others have tried to bury. Let's cultivate a better future together. Our next harvest of knowledge will be shared very soon. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever accidentally cooked your onions by leaving them in the sun or had them bolt into flowers unexpectedly? Let us discuss your experiences in the comments below.